What was that final you to a boss you didn't like? Story 1. She was a psychopathic narcissist. I knew she was plotting to leave her husband because I found it on a numbered to-do list on top of her desk. I was floored that she would leave it where her husband could see. It was a home office in one large room. I took a photo. She proceeded to harass and gaslight her husband, who took off one night and slept in a parking lot. When he returned the next day, she said, "You left me, so it's over." After she royally screwed me over for the umpteenth time, I quit. A few weeks later, I sent the photo to her husband, copied her, and wrote, "For your records," in the subject line. Then I reported her to the IRS. Who even adds that kind of thing to a to-do list? Buy eggs on the way home. Take out the trash. Get rid of my dumb husband. Have my nails done. Story 2. One of our cooks was from Nepal and needed a month off to go home and get married. HR denied his request for time off. I, the exec sous, threatened to quit if they didn't give it to him. His home was so remote it was going to take a week's worth of travel to and from. So it was just 2 weeks with his family for the first time in 5 years, and to get married. I found it ridiculous they wouldn't let a man, who hadn't taken any vacation and had warned enough PTO, go home for these events during our slow season. Story 3. As far as my life goes, it was the shittiest job I ever took. Long hours, a lot of crunch, no company vehicle, and a lot of travel. Every time I'd go to a different site, I would get like 20 different phone numbers for the various people I was communicating with. Anyway, so all of the contacts for these people was on my company phone that was synced up to my personal Gmail, which stored all the phone numbers. At some point, management decided my job was redundant and decided to lay me off without notice and without severance. First thing I did was wipe my company phone clean before handing it over. A few days later, they called me asking where all the contact information was stored. Sorry, I don't work for you anymore. Story 4. They weren't paying me travel and changing my place of residence to an apartment they owned in another city where the work was. This let them write off $5,000 a month for housing for me, while costing me a $1,200 deduction for taxes on my paycheck. My tax return had my apartment I rented, and my pay stubs had the apartment the company rented. I told them to change it or I was calling the CRA. They refused, and I called the CRA. They had been doing the same thing for most of their seasonal workers for the past 20 years. The owners had to sell the business to pay off the tax evasion penalties. Story 5. Mechanic at a commuter airline. Boss wanted me to sign off a plane pre-flight inspection. I refused to sign because the plane was not airworthy. He told me if I wished to continue working, then I'd better sign. My response? Then I guess I don't work here anymore. I picked up my toolbox and left. Edit. Yes, I am an A&P. I did report it to the head of maintenance as well as the FAA. No, I cannot reveal the airline, but rest assured they have been absorbed by other major airlines several times and are not flying these models of planes any longer. Story 6. When I left, he promised to take half what I was making and spread it among the team as raises to cover the extra work. He was trying to stop the exodus as I was the third person to leave in a short time. So when I left, I handed my pay stub, minus social security info, to the team and said, just in case he tried to lie, this is what I make. He tried to lie. They also realized they were being underpaid by a good chunk. He told me that was a breach of confidential information, and they could sue me. I told him to sue me then. Never heard from that company again except for tax docs. For those unfamiliar, in the US you are legally allowed to disclose your own pay, and it's illegal for your employer to tell you that you can't. I'm assuming, if he did try that, HR or the lawyers quickly corrected him before they had to hand me a settlement. Story 7. Salary was delayed by 2 weeks and was about told to be lenient because the company is growing and needs our help and cooperation. I waited for another week, but I was ignored. I left the job without notice, and upon them calling me to sue me, I replied, "You have money to sue people, but no money to pay employees." I switched job and I am at a better place right now. Story 8. Was in line for a promotion after my old supervisor was fired for ethics issues. Boss decided to open the requisition, interview, and hire a person all in the 2 days I had off. Since the person hired had no experience in my department/field, I was expected to train my new supervisor and the other new people they also hired. I did none of that. Quit, gave my 2 weeks, and didn't explain a single thing to anyone in those 10 days. Supposedly, it took almost half a year to get close to where they were before all this went down. In this situation right now, I'm the only one who can do the new boss's job because I used to assist the old boss. I refuse to help and enjoy sitting back and watching him fail. He's a twat. Story 9. I was a program director developing and piloting a new program, and after a year of being overloaded and telling our exec director I either needed a second person or a smaller caseload, he pulls me into his office and goes, "We don't really think you're a good fit for this position, but you're a bright young lady and we'd hate to lose you. I'm giving you the option to stay and be my secretary. You have until 7 a.m. tomorrow to decide." I took an early lunch, walked to my other job, asked if I could take on more hours, walked back, and told him I had found other employment and would have my stuff cleared out by noon. He asked if I could stay 2 more weeks to train a new person, and I told him no. "What if we paid you a consultation fee?" "No, but you're the only person in the county certified. Should have thought of that earlier." Bonus. This was in the middle of an audit where it was discovered that he owed me about $3,000 from unpaid hours. I like to call it my leaving bonus. Story 10. I reported him to the work inspection. He was employing more trainees than the legislation allows for a company this size and was making them work like full-paid workers, with basically no formation at all. He got controlled and fined a big amount of money, had to give money to a previous trainee that worked for him, etc. His company closed for bankruptcy after that. Sweet justice. Story 11. Well, it was an actual fuck you. He had just realized he was getting terminated for some pretty egregious safety-related ignorance that I and several others had reported. He was going through that sob story period while HR was investigating and came in for his shift one day, and HR had, accidentally, terminated him early, which he found out trying to use our work portal, and his logins didn't work for anything. So while he's sob-storying me, he was unaware of who had reported him, I basically go, "So this is your last day?" "Yeah, man, I'm terminated in the system." "Wow! That sucks for you. I just want to take this opportunity to tell you fuck you and fuck you for endangering our safety here. You were, by far, the worst manager I have ever seen." And then I just walked away. Story 12. My mom was in the final stages of cancer and wanted to be around my parents as much as possible. Tried to ask for leave by FMLA, and the sheriff-in-chief basically said, "That's life," and declined the leave plan. I quit and found another job and was able to have a good final 6 months with her before she passed. Story 13. Worked at this stupid fake French cafe, and the manager was an idiot who made a point of giving me the shittiest jobs just to show he was in charge. One day, he pulled me off the floor, where I earned tips as a server, and made me polish silver for hours. He kept returning and throwing every second piece back at me, telling me to do it over, kept saying missed a spot. So I walked out and kept the apron. I kept the beautiful black apron with the embroidered logo and still wear it when I cook today. Also invoiced the owner for my outstanding pay and informed him his manager was not up for the job. Owner begged me to reconsider, but I told him nope. Story 14. When the hiring person came to my work to pick me up in front of my old boss. I had a week where I was working for both companies, my first and last week. And as he actually came in to work to get me, his parting words to my previous boss was, "You're gonna regret letting this one slip." Then he smiled and winked and asked loudly if I wanted to pick up some food before we go in. His treat. And a pat on the shoulder. My coworkers and boss just stood there, staring like they just saw the aliens land in front of them. That was a pretty great feeling, and a memory for life. Even though it wasn't my fuck you, it felt like I never even needed to. It was just, they got showed up so f***ing hard, and they couldn't do anything about it, since I didn't do anything. Didn't need a reference from them, no outstanding pay I needed to fight about because I did everything by the book. Just glory. Story 15. I once worked at a gas station/convenience store that would stay pretty busy for a smallish town right off a major highway overnight, and I worked the night shift. The manager who hired me was great, and I enjoyed working for her. Then she left for better things, and suddenly there was this pure nugget of a manager who was just a bitter, racist old hag. She and I were basically instant enemies. One night I was 6 minutes late. I was very, very rarely late, and her little fuck buddy, I guess, called her to tattle on me after I relieved him, and then she called the store and started going off on me. Since I worked alone overnight until 7 a.m., I waited for about an hour after the berating phone call, and for a moment when the store was empty. I then hit the emergency stop for the pumps, locked the front doors, counted my drawer very slowly and carefully for the cameras so they couldn't accuse me of stealing, left a note saying I quit in the drawer, and then closed the register back up. Then I got on the store phone and called the district manager and left a voicemail explaining exactly why I quit and the fuckery the manager was up to. Then I went to the breakers, shut off the outside lights and most of the inside ones to make the place look closed, and I left out the side door which would lock behind me, got in my car and left. It's likely my quitting this way cost the store about $1,500 to $2,000 in sales that night. Story 16. After working my entire career for a company as an engineer, I was laid off with others for no reason. Remaining boss requested all my files so they could continue my work. I said, the day I leave, you will get all my files. Last day of work, I accessed the mainframe and download not just the relevant files, 20 years of files. Tons and tons of folders and files, all in random folders. I just sent him the link. He signed off, I left. He contacted me a few days later and said that's not what I meant by all the files. I said, I don't work there anymore. I have no computer. I gave you exactly what you asked for. Story 17. I was thinking about quitting, but was holding back. I scheduled a vacation with 3 extra days. It was a once-in-a-lifetime type of trip. He rejected my vacation request. I thought about it for a couple hours, went to his office and told him, I'm taking the trip no matter what. The next morning, the boss met me at HR and gave me a formal written warning. I responded by giving him my 2-week notice. They apologized and tried to convince me not to leave, but it was too late. I ended up quitting one job because a boss wouldn't give me time off for a vacation that was planned 9 months in advance. He ended up blacklisting me and gave me horrible references, keeping me from getting any jobs for about a year afterward, until I found out and called them out on it. That guy was a petty, garbage human. Story 18. We had a big event where we were in the city center. I, and the rest of the management team, worked approximately 80 hours in 5 days. Slept on the floor there, dealt with extremely aggressive drunk customers that destroyed everything, etc. My boss never listened to our concerns for safety and our concerns for our health. Afterwards, the boss had the audacity to tell us we should have worked harder and could have done better. The entire management team quit on the spot, leaving him with no management. The rest of our team was quite loyal to us, so they quit not long after. The store has recovered now, but it took him 5 years to come back from that. Story 19. Told all my colleagues he gave himself half of the team performance bonus in my exit email. There were 10 of us. The bonus was £3,000. He'd been given it to reward us all for our hard work. He was a horrible, micromanaging prick. Told me I lacked dedication once because I refused to stay up past 11:30 to get a presentation done that he told the client they were seeing the next day. You enjoy your early night, was what he said. Anyway, a lot of chaos ensued. Instead of splitting it 10 ways, he gave himself half, gave the person he was closest to 600, and then split 900 among the remaining 9. Yeah. Story 20. So I worked for a telemarketing company in southern Indiana in my 20s. Our ritual was going to Buffalo Wild Wings for a few beers and wings on Fridays for payday lunch. This went on for months without issue. So, an assistant manager walked in with his wife on his day off one day and told on us and got us fired. So, months later, I'm working at a gas station, and the same manager walked in hammered with a girl that wasn't his wife. I was friends with his wife's friend through the telemarketing job, and I asked if he got divorced. She said no, and I told her what I saw. It gets back to his wife, who then leaves him, and he goes crazy. She moved in with some guy, and the manager breaks in the guy's house and beats him with a bat and kidnapped the wife and their kid. Ended up getting prison time. Think he got out recently. Story 21. Waited until my grill was completely filled with steaks and burgers, clocked out and kicked the back door open, setting off the alarm. The cheap-ass owner wouldn't hire enough people and treated me terribly, though I could do every job in the kitchen. Ran into him about 10 years later and laughed in his face. 10 out of 10, would bail again. 1986-ish. Story 22. My boss had been riding my ass so hard about what I was doing, marketing, which she knew nothing about, that my doctor told me if I kept up the level of stress I was under, I'd end up having a cardiac event. I was 26. The last straw was when she denied my time off request for Christmas that she had already verbally okayed, told me that I already had Christmas Eve and Christmas Day off because they were on a weekend, and I needed to be there on Friday and Monday. So, The week before Thanksgiving, with the absolute most critical time for getting donations coming up because this was a non-profit, I walked into work and cleaned out my desk and then walked right back out. Sent an email from the parking lot to my boss, HR, and the board saying I quit because I wouldn't be disrespected anymore. My boss was the reason literally every other manager quit within 3 months. She's running the whole place by herself, deeply in the red, with almost no chance to recover. Story 23. Absolute beast of a manager in a Walmart photo lab when I was in school. She was the meanest son of a bitch I ever met. Just a constant black cloud hanging over her all day. I finally had enough of her bullshit and, thankfully, didn't really need the job. Going on like day 6 with no break at all, I told her I was taking a 15-minute break. She told me if I left the photo lab area, I would be fired. I walked to HR and told them I was quitting, effective immediately, and to please put a do not rehire flag on my file. They asked why I was quitting. Well, hey, I don't want to be the one to get my manager fired, so let's just say I want no part of what she's doing back there. You, Deb. Story 24. Cutting a long story short, I was hired as a marketing manager. My boss, who happened to be the MD, tried it on with me, and I obviously rejected his advances. He then decided, as punishment, but without making it official, that I would basically be relegated to being his PA, and left me out of all the marketing decision-making processes. Fine by me, I was an overpaid secretary. As I was handling all his admin, it didn't take me long to find some discrepancies. He was ordering things like business cards, letterheads, promotional materials, advertising, etc. from one particular supplier at highly inflated prices that never actually materialized. I figured there must be some sort of mistake. Took it to him, and he essentially told me it was none of my business, and he would sort it out. It was obvious that he was falsely ordering goods and services and taking a cash payment from the supplier in question. So I did some digging and made a separate file on everything he had ordered that didn't arrive or advertising that wasn't published, and it probably amounted to £100,000. Shortly afterwards, I was made redundant. I dropped the entire file into his boss on my last day, and as I walked by his office window, tapped on the glass and gave him the V sign. 1 month later, he was fired. Story 25. This doesn't seem like much, but I superglued tiny plastic dinosaurs all over the restaurant I once worked at. And I mean all over. Under tables, on the handle to the doors, on the coffee pot, on the fire extinguisher, on the toilet lids, especially on his office door and window. It must have taken hours just to find them all and get them unstuck.